Right now, a serial killer is stalking his next victim in New York City. Watching, waiting, ready to strike.
As terrifying as serial killers are, something about them seems to fascinate the public psyche. What's even more terrifying is knowing that some of these killers have never been caught, and they're still walking around society, probably smiling at strangers on the street and shopping at the local market, scouting for their next unsuspecting victim. Today, we'll be delving into 4 chilling and notorious cases of serial killers still active in 2024. 75. That's how many people the Chicago Strangler is believed to have killed within the span of 19 years. But with a body count sitting at such an astonishing number, why hasn't the killer ever been caught? Why has law enforcement done nothing to look into the murders? And why is this case so polarizing? The murders take place in Chicago's South and West Side neighborhoods, the earliest of which dates back to 1999 with a woman named Angela Ford. Angela had left home to pick up her children's report cards. She went missing, not to be found until days later when she was found unconscious. She remained in a coma and eventually died a year and a half later, in 2001. In 2002, another woman was killed in a horrible way. The pattern continued in 2007, when the body of Teresa Bunn, who was 8 months pregnant, was found in a dumpster. The very next day, the body of a woman named Hazel Lewis was found in a burning trash can at an elementary school. For clarity, by the end of 2019, the police had managed to solve 24 of the 75 cases, resulting in the arrests of 13 different men. But that still leaves 51 victims unaccounted for, all murdered in a pattern that is hard to miss. Everybody was found in similar locations in the neighborhoods of Chicago's South and West Side, either in abandoned buildings, alleyways, garbage bins, parks, or snowdrifts. A lot of the women had a history of prostitution, often had previous experiences with the justice system, and about 3/4 were black. Most victims were found in trash cans, plastic bags, or bound and gagged. They were all killed in a gruesome way. The brutality of their deaths can only be inferred from the way their bodies were found. But despite this, the media is all but lukewarm on the matter, and law enforcement has been hesitant to jump on the idea that the murders were perpetrated by a single killer. The Chicago Strangler is the name given to the perpetrator of the crime, the single serial killer that many believe is behind the murder. Thomas Hargrove, founder of the Murder Accountability Project, is one of the many who believe there's a serial killer at large in Chicago. In his words, "We know this is a series. We have no doubt. First of all, almost all of the victims were recovered out of doors, often in alleyways or abandoned properties. That's pretty unusual. At least 3/4 of the victims' deaths had a clear erotic component. The victims were found partially disrobed or completely nude." He declared in his conclusion, 51 different men did not kill these 51 women. Many of these women, probably most of them, were killed by men who had killed before. He also pointed out the fact that the murders stopped in 2014 before kicking back up in 2017. He believes this is because the killer was imprisoned at the time. However, despite the similarities between the cases, the belief of the general public and the work of the Murder Accountability Project, the Chicago police still believe the deaths were isolated incidents. Our next case occurred on the island of Kauai, Hawaii, and it involves a serial killer that has not been identified to this day. On the 7th of April, 2000, the body of a woman was discovered in a ditch close to Polyhale State Park, a remote wild beach on the western side of the Kauai, Hawaii. The woman, 38-year-old Lisa Bissell, had been heavily assaulted before her death. An investigation led to the discovery that she had been abducted from another part of the island before being murdered.
Daughter as well, a sister, So you do understand in what the families go through.
There was no way to conclusively identify who her killer in Kauai was until only a month later, another woman was attacked. This time, she lived to tell her harrowing tale. It was May 22, 2000, and a 52-year-old woman was working in her yard when a strange man approached her. The man spoke up saying, "My name is John, and I'm homeless." Being the kind person she was, the woman told him about a neighbor who frequently let homeless people camp out on their property. After giving him the necessary directions, she turned around to continue the work she was doing. That's when the man struck. He grabbed her and violently pulled her behind the house. There, he attacked her, causing serious injuries and trauma. During the assault, he attempted to inflict further harm with a knife, but the weapon was rendered ineffective. Panicked, he threw the knife in a bush and fled the scene. The woman had to crawl for 3 hours until she reached a telephone and called for help.
But she survived and was able to miraculously climb 2 stories stairs and call for help.
Even after experiencing such a traumatic event, the woman was able to describe her attacker for a sketch of the man to be made. However, on August 30th, 2000, the attacker struck again. The decomposing body of a woman was found at a remote campsite near Pacala Point Beach. The 43-year-old Maui resident, Darren R. Singer, tragically lost her life after a severe and brutal assault. The extent of the violence rendered her unrecognizable. Investigators determined that she was murdered at least 12 hours prior to the discovery of her body. A large memorial service was held in her honor, but it was clear that the attacks had rocked the island. However, investigators were sensing a pattern in the attacks. The victims all fell around the same demographic: middle-aged Caucasian women with similar heights and weights. They had all been alone when attacked, only to meet a violent assault and the end of a knife. Moreover, all the attacks took place on the west coast of Kauai. A few months after the attack, the 52-year-old victim who'd survived the killer's attack was flown to Honolulu and shown a police lineup. The woman was able to eliminate 2 men from the lineup as being the perpetrator, but was not able to narrow down the lineup any further. The police conducted extensive inquiries, including questioning 70 individuals with relevant criminal backgrounds on the island. The main person of interest in the investigation was identified as Waldorf Roy Wilson Waldorf, who had a previous conviction for serious offenses in Oahu in 1983, moved to Kauai in January 1999 as part of his parole arrangement. However, within a year, he faced arrest for not adhering to his parole conditions, which occurred amidst inquiries into other serious allegations. Due to his presence on the island during the time of the attacks, his history, and his parole violation, the police strongly believed that he had their guy, but Wilson sued the Kauai County Police Department and a magazine that ran the story that he was accused of the murders for defamation. The lawsuit was later dismissed, and Waldorf would walk out of this case a free man for entirely different reasons. His DNA was tested against the DNA of the perpetrator, and the result was inconclusive. Because of this, he was never charged with the 2 murders and the vicious attack of the surviving victim. It is believed that to this day, the Kauai killer, or John, patiently waits on the island looking for vulnerable women to attack. Our next case involves a name so infamous and 11 murders that are far from being solved. You may have already heard of this New York serial killer, but the true extent of his crimes is more harrowing than you can imagine, and his 14-year reign of terror is yet to be crowned with his arrest. From 1996 to 2011, a series of tragic incidents in Long Island led to the loss of at least 10 lives, with the possibility of more yet to be discovered. Many of the identified individuals were using Craigslist for their work, which led to the perpetrator being referred to as the Craigslist Ripper. However, the term Long Island serial killer emerged under different circumstances. The discovery of the victims was an unintended outcome during an unrelated investigation. On December 11, 2010, the Suffolk County Police Department Missing Persons Bureau was conducting an investigation into the disappearance of 24-year-old Shannon Gilbert, a woman who had gone missing after fleeing from a client's home. Before she completely fell off the radar, she made a harrowing 23-minute-long call to 911 saying, "They are trying to kill me." Officer John Malia was tasked with the responsibility of searching for Shannon with his trained cadaver dog, a German Shepherd named Blue. The officer kept his search designated for a gated beach community on Ocean Parkway in Oak Beach, Suffolk County. It was the last place Shannon had been seen, so it was as good a place as any to begin looking. Unfortunately, for the entirety of summer 2010, Officer Malia was nowhere closer to finding the missing woman. That was, until that day in December 2010, when Officer Malia decided to widen his field of search. The first discovery of human remains was made by the side of Ocean Parkway in Oak Beach on December 11, 2010. He started searching the shoulder of the parkway, away from the gated area but still in the area, going off on FBI data indicating that dumped bodies are frequently found close to roadways.
Like a car pulled up and opened the door and the bodies were dumped into the bushes.
During the search, Blue, the trained cadaver dog, detected something unusual. They found skeletal remains, but these were not of Shannon Gilbert. Instead, they belonged to Melissa Barthelemy, a 24-year-old from Erie County, New York, who had been missing since July 12, 2009. Melissa, who had been using Craigslist for work, had met with a client on the night she disappeared. That evening, she made a bank transaction of $900 and tried to contact a former boyfriend. The call didn't go through, and Melissa was never seen again. However, the story doesn't end there. 1 week later, Melissa's teenage sister, Amanda, began receiving strange phone calls.
So excited. Oh my God, Melissa's finally calling me. And then there's a guy on the other end.
The calls received were deeply unsettling and offensive, believed to be from the individual responsible for Melissa's disappearance. The caller made derogatory inquiries about Amanda's relationship to her sister, growing more distressing over time. This alarming series of calls lasted for 5 weeks, concluding with the caller grimly informing Amanda of Melissa's fate and making a chilling statement about it. Authorities traced the calls to Madison Square Garden, Midtown Manhattan, and Massapequa, but were unable to determine who was making them. Melissa's body wasn't the only one found on Ocean Parkway that day. While searching the scene, 3 more bodies were discovered. Another victim, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, was 25 years old when she went missing. She was from Norwich, Connecticut, and was last seen on July 9, 2007. That night, she called a friend in Connecticut and told her that she was planning on meeting a client outside of the motel and planned to spend the day in New York City. The mother of 2, in an effort to support her family and manage her mortgage payments, initially turned to Craigslist for income. She later transitioned to an escort job at a Super 8 motel in Manhattan. However, facing the challenge of an eviction notice, she felt compelled to return to her previous line of work. After she'd gone missing, her friend Sarah Carnes received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. The man claimed he'd seen Maureen alive working at a brothel in Queens. He didn't give Sarah the location of the brothel or identify himself, but he did say he would call her back later with an address. He never did. The third body found that day belonged to 22-year-old Megan Waterman, a mother from South Portland, Maine, who went missing on June 6, 2010. Like the other victims, she'd placed advertisements on Craigslist as an escort. At the time of her disappearance, she was staying at a motel in Hauppauge, New York, 15 miles northeast of Gilgo Beach. Sadly, Megan had been a victim of human trafficking, and her disappearance that night ended in her gruesome death. The final victim was 27-year-old Lynn Costello of West Babylon, New York, a small town just 10 miles north of Gilgo Beach. She went missing on September 2, 2010, after going to meet up with a stranger who had called her several times and offered $1,500 for her services. The 4 bodies were found approximately 500 feet from each other and were dubbed the Gilgo 4.
Lab was selected because its ability to take dampness, moisture, and breathe, which would promote decay, as well as act as camouflage.
Again, the story is far from over. The following year, on March 29th and April 4th, 2011, in Suffolk and Nassau counties, 6 more bodies that police had been dumped earlier than the 4 first found were discovered. The bodies were found in another parkway near Oak Beach and Gilgo Beach, about 2 miles east of those found in December. The first individual discovered in this case was 24-year-old Valerie Mack, also known as Melissa Taylor, who was reported missing in 2000. Initially, only part of her remains were found in a wooded area near Halsey Manor Road and Mill Road. Further searches in April 2011 led to the discovery of additional remains. It wasn't until May 2020 that she was finally identified. Another victim, Jessica Taylor, was also dismembered and disposed of in a similar manner. 34-year-old Karen Vergata met a similar fate. Other discoveries included the bodies of a mother and her child, and the body of a cross-dressing male simply dubbed Asian male. There are other possible victims that haven't been conclusively tied to the Long Island serial killer, but with a clear modus operandi identified and a laundry list of victims, it was hard to ignore that there was a serial killer on the loose. The real question was, who was he? In September 2017, a prosecutor suggested John Bitroff, a carpenter from Manorville with 2 previous murder convictions, might have been responsible for some of the Gilgo Beach cases. He was arrested, and although he was convicted for 2 separate earlier murders, no statement was made on his involvement in the Gilgo Beach murders. In July 2023, A 59-year-old Nassau County resident was arrested and charged with the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. He is also the prime suspect in the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. The man, Rex Andrew Huerman, became a suspect after a Chevrolet Avalanche identified by a witness and linked to one of the killings was registered in his name. His cell phone records also revealed that he had been in contact with 3 of the 4 victims. It was discovered that the man had peculiar taste. His search history revealed sadistic materials and images of the victims and their relatives. His DNA was also linked to hair found on the burlap wrappings of one of the bodies. He pleaded not guilty, but ultimately had no conclusive ties to the 10 victims found. It's theorized that the killer possibly has a law enforcement background, judging by how he's managed to elude capture for so long. And as for Shannon Gilbert, the woman whose body started it all, her body was found a year after the remains of the Gilgo Four. And although her cause of death remains contested, with police claiming accidental drowning while an independent autopsy determined possible strangulation, it is believed that her murder is an isolated incident unrelated to the Long Island serial killer case. Her now deceased mother strongly believed otherwise. The Jeff Davis 8, also known as the Jennings 8, is a case shrouded in mystery through and through. This series of unsolved murders took place between the years 2005 and 2009 in Jefferson Davis Parish, Louisiana, when the bodies of 8 women were found in swamps and no one knows how they got there or has any idea who took their lives. But the hunt for a killer began with the discovery of the body of 28-year-old Loretta Lewis in a river. It was the 20th of 2005, and a fisherman was out on the Grand Marais Canal's East Fork, a few miles southwest of Jennings, angling when he found a body floating in the river. Loretta was last seen 3 days before her death, and she was found partially clothed and shoeless. The advanced decomposition caused difficulty identifying her cause of death, but an autopsy found Loretta had no physical injuries. The toxicology analysis indicated the presence of significant amounts of substances and alcohol in her system. However, the exact cause of her passing remained undetermined. It didn't take long before the authorities discovered that Loretta's wasn't the only skeleton in the waters, so to speak. The body of 30-year-old Ernestine Marie Daniels Patterson was soon discovered on June 18th in a drainage canal off LA Highway 102. The mother of 4, Iota State University employee and Jennings resident, was last seen on June 16, 2005, and her body was found partially clothed. Her death was ruled a homicide, and 2 people were arrested and charged with 2 end-degree murder, but were later released due to lack of evidence. The 3rd victim was 21-year-old Kristen Gary Lopez, who was discovered by a fisherman on March 18th, completely nude in the Petit Jean Canal, a rural area near Cherokee Road right off LA 9 about 10 miles south of the town of Welsh. Again, the autopsy reports remained inconclusive on the cause of death, but toxicology results showed high levels of alcohol in her system. In May 2007, Frankie Richard and his niece, Hannah Connor, were arrested in connection with Lopez's death. The pair were also questioned about the other deaths before Kristen's body was even found because Richard was reportedly seen with 3 of the victims in the last days of their lives. However, again, charges were dropped due to lack of evidence and conflicting witness statements. Also arrested was Tracy L. Chason, who reported Kristen missing. Investigators believe she knew where the body was when she made the report, and again, the charges were dropped due to lack of evidence and conflicting statements. The next victim, 26-year-old Whitney Dubois, was found nude on the May 12, 2007, at the intersection of Bobby and Earl Duhan Roads, approximately 5 miles outside of Jennings, Louisiana. Cause of death undetermined. High levels of alcohol and drugs were found in her system. On May 29, 2008, the remains of 23-year-old Laconia Muggy Brown were discovered on Rocca Road near a police training area. She was found without shoes and wearing a white tank top style shirt, which had changed color, possibly due to a diluted substance. It appeared that she had suffered significant harm, and unusual measures had been taken with her remains. She was last seen 2 days prior to the discovery, and it is believed that her remains were placed on the road only hours before they were found. Investigators are working to understand the full circumstances surrounding this tragic event. Next was 24-year-old Crystal Shea Benoit Zeno, who was found on September 11, 2008, near a dry irrigation canal a few miles from Jennings, Louisiana. The woman was married with a daughter, and she loved to spend time with family and friends. According to her parents, Crystal, who went by Shay, was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at age 12 and started using certain substances to cope with the illness. On the day her body was discovered, hunters reported a foul smell in a wooded area to authorities. Her body was found on the LaCour Road levee off LA Highway 1126, a few miles southeast of Jennings. She was so badly decomposed that she wasn't identified until 2 months later with DNA. The seventh of the Jeff Davis 8 was also the youngest. 17-year-old Brittany Gary was last seen walking out of the Family Dollar store in Jennings. She never came back home. Sometime that same day, she was kidnapped, and although her family hoped she would be found alive soon, that wasn't the case. On November 15, 2008, her deceased body was found in a grassy area outside Jennings. She was a trusted friend of Christine Gary Lopez and knew several of the other victims. The final body, that of 26-year-old Nicole Guillory, was found off Interstate 10 on August 19, 2009. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, determining the exact causes of death for most of the victims proved challenging. Investigations did indicate that Ernestine and Laconia suffered severe injuries, but conclusive details regarding the others were not ascertainable. While authorities hypothesized that asphyxia might have been involved, the state of the remains left many questions unanswered. What we do know for certain is the strange connection between the victims. While the other cases we've looked at involves victims who were total strangers to one another, the Jeff Davis 8 knew each other well. Some were even blood-related, with Kristen Gary Lopez and Brittany Gary being cousins, and Gary living with Crystal Benoit shortly before her death. Investigators also revealed a pattern of similar traits that the 8 shared. They were all living in poverty, suffering from mental illness, and all had histories of working in the Jennings South. Another peculiar tidbit is the victims' connections with law enforcement. All the women served as informants for the police about the local illegal medicine trade, and some even provided police with information about other Jeff Davis 8 victims before their own deaths. One of the victims, Kristen Lopez, witnessed the police shooting and death of a dealer named Leonard Crochet in 2005. She also knew Alvin Bootsy Lewis, the boyfriend of victim Whitney Dubois and father of her child, as well as the brother-in-law of the first victim, Loretta Chason Lewis, along with several individuals connected to the Jeff Davis 8 case. It seems that, when it comes to this case, each victim isn't the target of a serial killer hungry for power. It's that of a calculating murderer looking to shut witnesses up. Despite the fact that Leonard Crochet was unarmed when police shot and killed him, a grand jury's investigation revealed that there was no evidence to support a negligent homicide charge against the officers. But the decision put out an entire flurry of rumors against the police. Witnesses told investigators they believed the police had killed many of the victims because of what they knew about the shooting of Leonard Crochet. In December 2008, a task force consisting of 14 federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies was formed to solve the Jeff Davis 8 case. And although the task force searched for a serial killer from the outset, the more an investigator looked into it, the more the connections between the victims were brought to light. It was even revealed that the families of the victims believe that the police are actually responsible for the deaths. Ethan Brown, an investigative reporter who has been documenting the case, revealed that task force investigative reports present witness interviews in which local law enforcement were implicated in the murders. 2 female inmates confessed to working with the sheriff's office to dispose of evidence in the Lopez case. But strangely enough, the sergeant who took their statements was forced out of his job, and the allegations were ignored by law enforcement. In an interview, Nicole Guillory's mother, Barbara, gave Ethan Brown insight on her daughter's behavior. She said, "She was always paranoid. It got to the point where she did not want to go anywhere by herself." Adding, "I think she could feel that they were closing in on her." Nicole even refused to celebrate her 27th birthday. Barbara said, "I bought some icing and cake for her birthday. She said, 'Mama, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to be here.'" Before her death, Guillory housed her 4 children with relatives. A task force witness revealed that in her final days, she was scared of someone, but she would not say who. Nicole also mentioned that she knew who killed the girls. Barbara believes that her daughter was murdered because she witnessed the corruption of local law enforcement. To Brown, she said, "She used to tell us all the time it was the police killing the girls. We'd say, 'Nicole, a name, something. Write a letter and leave it somewhere. Let us know.' We can help you." "No, Mama, it's too far gone. It's too big. I'd rather y'all not know anything. That way, nothing can happen to you all." She knew, and that's why they killed her. Several other families of victims have similar stories. Ethan Brown wrote, "Gail Brown, a sister of the fifth victim, Laconia Muggy Brown, told me that just before Muggy was killed, she worriedly informed her family that she was investigating a murder with a cop. The cop wanted to give her $500 to tell what happened. And she knew what was going on," she told me, referring to her sister's work as a cooperator. "I think it was a cop that killed my sister." Again, task force witness interviews corroborate the Brown family accounts, with one individual telling the investigators, Laconia Brown told her that 3 police officers were going to kill her. When it comes to the accusations of corruption and misconduct lodged against the Jennings police force, it's an understatement to say the list is long. Back in the 70s, local law enforcement was riddled with officers who dabbled in illegal medicine trafficking. In March 1990, 2 locals broke into the sheriff's office, stealing an eye-watering 300 pounds of illegal substances. When one of the burglars was interviewed, he confessed that Frankie Richard and Ted Gary, who was the chief deputy sheriff at the time, were his accomplices. No charges were brought against the 2 men. There have been reports of sheriffs using parish funds to purchase personal items illegally, sheriffs unlawfully and purposefully stopping cars with out-of-state plates, even more reports of improper dealings with inmates, and even the murder of one officer and his wife by another officer. Perhaps Ethan Brown is right to think that there's no serial killer at work here, because the crimes of the Jennings law enforcement are hard to ignore. In October 2003, 8 female Jennings cops filed a civil rights lawsuit in federal court against Jennings Police Chief Donald Lucky DeLuche, a group of male officers, and the city of Jennings, accusing them of constant violence and harassment. In the complaint, a woman reported inappropriate and unwelcome behavior from a captain towards female officers. This included suggestive comments and an alleged incident of coerced intimate contact with a female officer. In January 2013, former Jennings Police Chief Johnny Lasseter was hit with a slew of charges after a Louisiana State Police audit found $4,500 in cash, 1,800 pills, more than 380 grams of the white stuff, and several pounds of other substances missing from the department's evidence room. Sheriff's Office Chief Criminal Investigator Warren Gary was also accused of purchasing a truck suspected of having been used to transport a body for the purpose of discarding evidence. It's almost like the Jennings police force was full of officers who had exactly zero care for the law. But, with everything going on, they couldn't refuse to do anything about the 8 murders for much longer. In 2009, the sheriff ordered that every investigator working the Jeff Davis 8 case be swabbed for DNA to put the accusations against investigators at rest. And what you know, the office refused to comment on the results of the test. In total, police have only arrested or issued warrants for the arrest of 4 people in connection with the Jeff Davis 8 case. The question remains, is this the work of a serial killer or that of dirty cops? We'll let you answer that.